Hello and welcome back to Our Bookshop in Tring. I'm Ben Morehouse. So we've got another author interview today. We've got the wonderful Jamie Fewery. He's a near neighbour, lives down the road in Berkhamsted. And he came in November to talk about Our Life in a Day. And he's since published his second book, and it's called The Way Back. So he's going to be chatting to Harriet Queralt.
Thank you. So your first novel, Our Life in a Day. So it starts with Esme and Tom celebrating their 10-year anniversary.
Yeah.
And Esme asks Tom to choose the most significant moments in their relationship. So one for every hour of the day. It's a really brilliant idea for a novel. How did that come to you?
So it came sort of collaboratively with the editor. As I say, I'd written this other book and he was interested in it but didn't offer on it, and then one of the things he really liked from it was it talks a lot about male mental health, so we started talking about other ideas that could be around that and making it around a love story and a couple, and a game and from that came this 10-year anniversary. And then I think that it was kind of just a general concept, and then I started to unpack it from there really and think about what are the big moments in these people's lives, what are the big moments in everybody's life, and then tying it to some themes that I find really interesting or I care about, which for this one was male mental health, which was being much discussed at the time I was writing it anyway, and I'd written a bit about that for the papers and stuff. So yeah, it kind of was born out of a concept. We talked about it in a pub and kind of unpacked the idea and where it could go and what these characters might be like. So it was. I don't think it was like a sudden that's the idea. It was more of a gradual process. And 24 hours in 10 years, 24 hours is kind of a nice little riff for it. But also, what I really enjoyed about the idea is that you get to dip in and out of so many parts of someone's life, and you can build up a really what I hope is a genuine portrait of a couple, by looking at some of the more mundane elements of their life and then some of the more profound ones, and how these all interplay to build up this 10-year history of a relationship that is in a bit of trouble, and needs some direction around it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really enjoyed about it, actually, that it was a very realistic view of a relationship. So these points that Tom chooses, they're not, all the high points. Some of it is just, like you said, in reality. So did you take much of that from your own experience, or is it imagination? Or
almost nothing from my own experience. Most of it's imagination. There are a lot of so most of the places they go to in the novel I'd been to in the kind of past year. So there's one bit where they go to Whitstable in Kent and they get stuck in a traffic jam. I'd been in that traffic jam, but we didn't have an argument. My wife and I were just in a traffic jam. I thought that's probably, that I think that's where I got the realness of it is, things can happen when people are in a traffic jam. It's a really mundane place to be, but it can be the scene of something quite profound happening if, people get stuck in a car for ages together, which oddly became kind of the second book as well. And then, but in terms of direct emotional experiences, there's not a great deal I've moved over, but there's locations and there's certain bits and pieces that I've copied over. There are bits of truth in there. But it's minor things. Like my brother was reading it, and there was a thing about someone who didn't buy their girlfriend a Christmas present because she had told him not to, and my brother actually did that. And he texted me while he was reading the book on honeymoon, and he said, "I've been right mugged off here," and I'd forgotten I'd put it in. I was like, "Oh God, I put that actual anecdote in. I'm really sorry." So I did kind of bit of a magpie, borrow things from real life, but nothing incredibly profound.
Yeah. And as you've mentioned, the other great thing I think about the book is it deals with the theme of men's mental health, which traditionally maybe hasn't been talked about enough. Did that just emerge as part of Tom's character, or was that something you thought it was important to write about?
That was kind of there from the beginning. That was kind of the steer for the book. So when I first spoke to the editor, one of the key themes we wanted to explore was male mental health, because there was a lot of conversation about it at the time. There were quite a few non-fiction books that had been published around it. There was a huge amount of articles in papers about it. I'd written about it several times, but it wasn't really addressed in fiction an awful lot, and especially not like a really like what I hope is an accurate portrayal of it, where it's not. I think people can kind of glamorize things, or well, not glamorize it, but they can make it really profound, and they can have people have these huge realizations about their life. Whereas the reality is, these things are just very damaging on a day-to-day basis and cause people to make decisions they would otherwise not make. And that's kind of the story I wanted to tell. So I wanted to make it really, really grounded. And you know, like a lot of men, I'd been preceding going to university when I was 23. There was a period in my life where I had kind of poor mental health and that kind of thing. So I lifted a little bit from there, but nothing direct. I just cast myself back and thought, how would it have been if I hadn't changed anything? How would it have been if that had become worse? Or and then started to explore it from that point. So that was really integral to the story from day one. And what I wanted to tell was a story about a man whose struggles with his own mental health begin to affect the most important relationships in his life.
Yeah, thank you. So I've just read your brilliant new novel, The Way Back. Really enjoyed it. Can you explain the gist of it without giving the story away?
Yeah, I can. So there are 3 siblings, the Cadogan siblings, and they used to be a really, really tight-knit family. And they used to be a really like close group. They were friends as well as siblings. And then they fell out and they haven't spoken for 3 years. But while this is all happening, their father is dying of cancer. And when he passes away, he leaves them, it's sort of a will, but it's more of a request. And when they all collect after his funeral, they are given a letter from him attached to a fishing tackle box. He's a big fisherman. And what the letter asks is that they travel together in his knackered old camper van to Islay, Hebridean Island in Scotland, with 3 photo albums and a really good bottle of single malt scotch. And the request is they scatter his ashes on the beach at Port Ellen. And they use that trip to go through the photo albums, explore who they were as a family, why these divisions have emerged between them, their individual roles in that, and how they might have been cruel to each other, and how they might have done things differently, and perhaps to find a way to reconnect. And through that, there's some surprises in there about other traumatic events that have affected their family. And it's kind of, on the face of it, you might look at this family and think they're nice people, they've got all they want in life, everything's fine, there's nothing wrong. But under the surface, there's all sorts of tensions and bitterness and resentment, and that's why they've just not spoken in years. And so you force them together on a camper van and see how it goes.
It's such a great idea. I think it makes for a brilliant story. How did you get that idea? Was it the traffic jam in Whitstable?
No, this one is a slightly more direct experience. Years ago, in 2016, me and my 4 best friends drove to Islay in a camper van to go on a whiskey tasting trip, because Islay, for those that don't know, is a big whiskey island. Probably the biggest sort of concentration of single malt whiskies makers in Scotland, or in the world, I don't know. And we went up there a few years ago, and we toured round all the distilleries. And I just remember that we had this journey back that took something like 14 hours. It was absolutely ridiculous. I remember we left the campsite we were on an Islay at 8:30 in the morning. We weren't even out of Scotland by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We were like, oh God. I just thought, if you put a warring family in this situation, God knows what could happen and how it could kind of explode really, really quickly. So I'd always wanted to write a family story, and something that talked about the undercurrents of family. And I come from a really close-knit family as well. We are good friends. We're really close, and we've not had that massive falling out, and touch wood, we won't. But I started to think about what happens when that is the case, and how best to expose those tensions. Then I thought about the camper van idea, and I thought I'll bring those 2 things together and see what happens. And there's another, I won't reveal it because it's not a huge spoiler, but it's certainly something that's important to the plot. There's another really big secret about their family, a hugely traumatic event that happened to them. And I thought, that was another thing I wanted to write about. I thought I'll bring that into this book as well, to add that extra layer of complication around them, because this event is something they all feel incredibly guilty about. And when the book is told through three perspectives of the three children, which are Patrick, Jessica, and Kirsty. And as we explore each of their perspectives, you see they all feel they could have done something differently to prevent this traumatic event happening, but they also blame each other for allowing it to happen.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really clever the way that came in. It just added that, that extra layer. And it was great. So are you a whiskey connoisseur then? Do you have any recommendations for us?
I'm not a massive, I wouldn't say I'm a connoisseur, I'm certainly an enjoyer. Yeah, I quite like the Islay ones. One of my friends, Darren, is really, really up on this kind of stuff. And when we went up there, he was the one that was tasting everything and telling us all about it. And he really gets it. I have a few bottles of whiskey. My favourite one is one called Brooklady, which is from Islay. Has no relevance to the book. The whiskey they have in the book is one called Port Ellen, which is and the whiskey itself is not just in there for the sake of it. It has a really important role to play in the plot. But Port Ellen whiskey, I think the distillery went out of business a few years ago, and it's now being bought back again, which is an interesting thing that's happening at the same time. But the only reason that made it in there is because the dad, Gerry, is a connoisseur himself. And it's just a really, really expensive bottle. I remember when I was up in Islay, I looked behind the counter of a shop and they had a bottle of this Port Ellen. It was like thousands and thousands of pounds, just because it's so rare, because they closed down in the 1980s.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Coming from Tring, I quite like the fact that your sort of quite high maintenance character, Jessica, is from Berkhamsted.
Yep.
Do you have any local reaction to this?
None so far. I don't know if maybe when more local people read it, I'll get a few angry letters or something like that. But I have this thing where I always think there's too many books that are set in London, when like a lot of people live in London, but not everyone lives in London. People live in all sorts of places. So I've always made a kind of conscious effort not to say everything in London. So in this instance, the family are based primarily in Hove, in Brighton, which is near Brighton, which is not an area I've got a particular connection to. My nan recently asked me why I set it in Hove, and I said I needed somewhere that was a sufficient distance from Islay to make the trip last as long as it needed to. So I was like, it's got to be on the south coast. But the dad is from Watford initially, like me. And is a Watford Football Club fan. I don't think Watford Football Club feature in a lot of popular fiction. So
I noticed.
In my last book, Our Life in a Day, the protagonist Tom is from Lowestoft, which is where my wife's family are from. So I've always got this thing where I try and set things in places where I have either some vague connection to, or just are not necessarily London, because I think things can get a bit.
I really enjoyed
the capital.
I thought they were, really vivid depictions of those places. I really enjoyed that feature. So you said you have, I was going to ask you about plans for your next novel. You have got some plans.
Yeah.
But not the band idea then?
No, that's kind of, that's parked for now. If anyone is watching this who desperately wants to publish that book, then please do get in touch. But no, that one will sit around for a while. I like that, but maybe it's one of those that will feature again in the future. The next book, I want to write something that's sort of more comedic, or I think there's a bit of humour in The Way Back, a bit kind of darker humour. The next book I want to write is going to be about people and relationships, and when things go wrong and how people try and put things right again. But I'm hoping it'll be more of a kind of romantic comedy. Yeah,
brilliant. And will you still have to fit that in around work?
Yeah, very much so. Yes, I'm still a full-time copywriter for an agency called Octopus Group in London. I say the only thing that's different at the moment is I'm not doing that long commute, and I've got more of my evenings, and because I'm not doing the commute, I'm less tired in the evening. So I'm actually getting more time to sit down at my desk or outside in the garden and write it, which is a really unique thing for me. And it's not, I think a lot of writers take for granted that you can have a desk, or I think a lot of aspiring novelists also think, oh God, I haven't got the time, I haven't got the space, I haven't got the conditions to do this. So I've always kind of been an advocate of breaking that, but now for once in my life, I've got an opportunity to.
No, I think it's amazing that you managed to write a novel on a commute.
Yeah, I don't know how sustainable it is.
Probably quite a lot of people watching this, commute into London.
Yeah, I imagine they do, yeah.
Or, people during this lockdown, I wonder how many people have thought, right, I will write that novel.
I think there's a lot of that about, yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of lockdown writing about. I saw a tweet from an agent saying they've just got their first bunch of lockdown novels submitted. I think it will happen, but I can't imagine reading anything worse in like 2 years' time than a novel about the coronavirus crisis. I was like, oh, don't remind me.
I know. And actually, at the beginning of this, I thought, oh, now maybe, this is the time to write a novel. But actually, I've been so busy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people maybe have these plans, but then they need to get back to their commuting to do it. So.
Well, exactly. Yeah, there are a few writers who I've spoken to over the past couple of years who've written books on trains. I think Beth O'Leary, who wrote Flatshare, did some of that while she was commuting. There's a guy called Jonathan Gibbs who I've spoken to on Twitter. He writes commuting, and there's someone called Jean Hannah Edelstein who writes a lot about this this thing of not always having somewhere specific to write. And she lives in New York, and I remember one thing where she was saying sometimes she just on like a subway train, you just get out a laptop, you've got 10 minutes. So just kind of getting things done, isn't it, when you've got a busy life? Yeah.
It probably gives you ideas, like all the people watching on trains.
Oh yeah.
For characters and stuff. But,
there's some people on the train that have certainly cropped up, and a couple. Sometimes if someone's having a particularly hilarious conversation, I might write a few notes down about something, and they might find themselves inadvertently appearing in a book.
Yeah, I once missed a stop on the train because I was so busy listening to someone's hilarious conversation. But no, I imagine that gives you a lot of material. So
yeah.
Oh well, Jamie, it's been absolutely great talking to you. Can I massively recommend these two novels? I think Ben is going to give some details about how people can still purchase these, even though the bookshop's currently closed. They're taking online orders. So get your orders in. Really, really enjoyable novels. Highly recommend them. And thank you very much, Jamie.
Thank you.
A massive thanks to Jamie and to Harriet for that wonderful conversation. So you can get the book from us at Our Bookshop. Give us a call on 01442 827 653. All the details will be under this video in whatever blurb you're reading and whatever social media format. So thank you so much to Jamie and Harriet again, and we'll see you for the next one.